We're live with our third finalist from the self-published science fiction contest. We are here today with Andy Giesler. I did get your name right, yes?
You did, yep.
All righty. Finally
good.
spelled it right and everything.
Yep.
So how are you doing today, Andy?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys doing?
And I have this to hold up.
Oh, nice. Oh, so you're that sale. You're the one who bought my book. Awesome.
Isn't it nice when you can still track your sales like that?
Yeah.
That dude.
Sweet.
So I liked your book. Some of the other ones cost like $25. I mean, but they were also, like that thick. So
funny story. I got both my books here. So this was my first one. There's Nothing Within. Yep. That's that one. So
you wrote
it's interesting. So this one, how much bigger would you guess this one is than this one?
It's probably like 50% bigger.
That's what it looks like. This is 100,000 words. This is 118.
Really?
The difference is, and it was something I learned, it was a good learning for a self-published author who wants anybody to buy their book in print. I like to write lots of short chapters. And if you write lots of short chapters and actually have them be chapters, the last page of each chapter is on average half blank.
Right.
So that's an empty sheet of paper that the person who buys it has to pay for. So when I wrote the second one, even though it's not that much smaller, I ran the little chapters together into sections with a little section marker in between them, and suddenly it's like half the price. So I'm glad that worked out for you.
So,
but it looks so much more impressive when it's, a doorstop.
I know, and actually, when the new one came, I was like, "Really? That's all I wrote?" It felt so much bigger when I wrote it, but yeah, the doorstops are nice for something.
So that's your second book.
Second book. It's a second. Well, actually, so this is my first book. I wrote this when I was 10. It's Attack of the Dinosaurs.
Oh, look at that! That's
nice.
I've still got it. That's
like a proper typewriter.
Yeah, it's like 17 pages. I was so proud of this. And I've got this is a legal pad that I cut out for the covers. You got the white yarn binding.
Nice.
And it's the story of scientists at a military base in the Arctic, the one closest to the North Pole, and they're looking for gasoline because you find gasoline underground in the ice, and the problem is that the gasoline is 24,000 feet underground, and the deepest well ever dug is only 23,500 feet, so it's unreachable. So they use atom bombs to get to it, as you do.
As you do.
And they unearth dinosaurs that come to life, and there's Rampage and all that. So it was a page turner. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of going back to that? And
boy, tempting, very tempting. I think I'm gonna have to just keep this as a memento, though.
Yeah. I was going to say, when is that going to be available?
Well, it'd be pretty cheap to buy too. At 17 pages. Well,
what you should do is after you win Spaceboat, is do a Kickstarter campaign and make copies of that, a limited edition of copies for that just for Kickstarter people.
Yeah, I could hand letter it, and I could put the doodles on the back like it's got.
Yeah, I mean, and that typing inside, yeah. Probably be the first time a lot of people have ever read something that was actually typed.
All the whiteout?
This makes my old heart feel so good.
I have a question. So that's SPSFC, right?
Yes.
That's how you pronounce that? And It's for anybody who's watching who doesn't know, it's a self-published fantasy blog off.
Correct.
Kind of a big deal among fantasy bloggers. And then we got SPSFC. You got the SPSFC.
Yeah.
How would you pronounce that?
Facebook.
I always say that. Specific.
Okay, I've been saying specific, but that could be confusing. And until about a week ago, I thought it was the self-published science fiction contest, but it's a self-published science fiction competition, it turns out. And I've had it wrong for
I thought
years.
it was contest. Huh?
No.
Well, there we go. I thought I saw on their website where they said we pronounce it this way, and I was like, oh yeah, and I was like, oh, I'm still going to call it Spaceboat.
Space Bow. Okay. Now, Space
If they
Bow's
were
good.
smart, they would call it Space Bow too,
Space Bow.
just to
too.
take advantage of the far further reaching spiff bow kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I was
How long Spiff Bow been around?
This is 10.
10.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because this is like the third, whatever
Yeah.
it is, specific.
So is this your book you entered this year for the first time in Spacebo?
My first book, The Nothing Within, I actually entered that in Spiffbo. There's one of the judges in the Spiffbo contest, Lukasz, and I can't say his last name. He's, I think, from Poland.
Yeah.
Lukasz P. He was like a super great supporter, and he was one of the readers of my first book when it was just available pre-publication as an ARC.
Mm-hmm.
And then that July, he said, "Have you ever heard of Spiffbo?" And I said, "No, I don't know what that is." And he said, "I think you should enter." And I looked at it and I got back to him. I said, "Well, Spiffbo is a fantasy thing, and my first book was science fiction." And he said, "Well, yeah, but it reads like fantasy," which it does. And I described it that way. But I said, "Really? I mean, it's a science fiction book that's set like distant future in what's kind of used to be Amish country. And it's science fiction though." And he said, "No, do it." So I entered it in Spiffbo, and it actually made it to semifinals.
Okay.
And then all the feedback was really good. I wonder if it wasn't fantasy enough, because it was more of a science fiction book. So then the next year he got in touch with me and he said, "Have you heard of SPSFC?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, somebody's trying to do the same thing for science fiction that they've been doing for fantasy with Spiffbo, and I think you should enter." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I entered the same book in that, and I think it was semifinals, got to semifinals also. So this time around, I knew kind of what it was all about when I entered 3 grams of elsewhere in the contest.
So how is it being a finalist as opposed to a semifinalist now that you have a very small group of competitors against you now?
It's twice as good.
Yeah.
I'm happy with here. I am. This is not aw shucks. I'd be surprised if mine wins. Because there's some really good books out there. I also know that both of my books, and I think it's my writing style, can be a little polarizing. Where in general reviews of both are really good, but they really rub some people the wrong way. Just the structure. And so, all it takes is 2-3 judges to be rubbed the wrong way. And I'm fine with that, because people can be rubbed the wrong way about what they want,
Right.
And
So yeah, I'm happy with just the semifinals.
Yeah. So here's the important question for you, Andy. What are you drinking?
So this is, and I know this isn't a book and a beverage episode, but this is a maple old fashioned. So use maple syrup, and I call it, because it's got maple syrup and it's an old fashioned with bourbon, I call it a Kentucky Derby.
Nice.
See what I did there?
Nice.
Yeah.
So, and it's got a
what's the recipe?
Well, it's like 2 shots of bourbon, however much maple syrup I feel like, and then just some bitters, some old-fashioned bitters. And the bourbon is actually from a farm that's about 12 miles from here. It's just pretty close to my house. Because I think we can all agree that bourbon from Kentucky's fine if you can't get the Wisconsin stuff, but this stuff is
fighting.
They actually, I know they grow they grow the wheat, the corn, the rye on their own farm.
Mm-hmm.
And the corn is this heirloom corn that nobody else in the world has, because it was developed in the 30s and they're the only ones who kept it going. So it's I really like it. It's a really good bourbon, but it's not from Kentucky, but it's still pretty good. If
you ever find yourself in Radford, Virginia, or down this way, there is a distiller down here called J.H. Bard, who does not pay me for telling people about this all the time, but they make a maple whiskey.
Oh, really?
Which uses real maple syrup as well.
Okay.
And it is mighty good. And it's nice because you can just pour it out, or you just drink it out of the bottle, really. But you don't need to mix it with anything.
That's just local? You don't think you could get that anywhere else?
You could certainly look. I don't know. They might ship it out.
Yeah, this stuff is called.
Website?
It's J.H. Bard, you said?
I will do a little research while Mike talks or rolls dice or whatever it is he's going to do.
Well, this stuff is called J. Henry and Sons, in case you're ever in Madison, Wisconsin, or thereabouts.
J. Henry. You know, I used to have to go to Janesville about once a year.
Sure.
But I haven't been there in probably a decade now, and I don't even know if anybody who I talked to is still working for the company now, because they were all 10 years older than me, so they're probably all retired.
Okay.
10 years older than you, they're probably dead, man.
Oh, no. Let's not fight.
Mike.
Oh. So I did want to just mention Andy, because we interviewed Anna Ellis on this show, and she's a semifinalist this year, and we interviewed Wick Welker, who's a finalist, and both of them said they put their books in last year, and both of them were out in the first round. Didn't even make quarterfinals, and they both were like, you know what? Maybe I just didn't jive with the judges. I'm going to put them in again, and one made semifinals and one made finals. So,
yeah, you know what? The first time when I did the Nothing Within, and I put it in SPSFC, it got to semifinals, but then that was the first year. And I think it was a tough year because they had no time limit. It was everybody who had published a science fiction book ever could enter in that one. I think there were like 300 entrants. And it got to semifinals, and then it was after that year they came up with the rule that you could resubmit. And I think the idea being, you can, if you just rub one judge wrong. In fact, one of the judges for mine said that it was their group's pick. My book was their group's pick overall to advance, but there was one person who really didn't like it. And so I resubmitted, and it went out in the first round. Didn't even get to semifinals. So it can go both ways.
Yep.
It's just like that, though, right? I mean, there are people who don't like this stuff that, millions of people love, and there's always someone who doesn't like it.
Yeah, if you do the experiment of like picking your top 10 favorite books and then go read the 1-star reviews, because they've all got 1-star reviews.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Except for Mike. Mike doesn't have any 1-star reviews.
Oh, really? Nice.
I have a couple 1-star ratings, but no one has actually
really?
Put it in words what they really hated about my book. I'm waiting for that impatiently.
See, this one got it was like 2 months ago. It got a review on Amazon that was, I'm not making this. I mean, this isn't word for word. It basically said, this book is stupid. It sucks. I hate it. It's awful. It's like, okay, well, thanks for trying, I remember my first 1-star review with the Nothing Within, the guy who wrote, and I was mortified, right? I get this 1-star review. It was fairly soon after it was released. And the guy said, I was in the military for 30 years and I have never heard this much swearing in my life.
He's lying.
What? And I wonder, maybe Canadian military? I don't know. But there's not that much swearing in it, but it's just, you just have to find something that really sets somebody off.
A lady commented on one of my books about swearing, and I had to go through it to find what she was, and I think I used the word damn once.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, oh, you don't know swearing, because the most impressed I've ever been in my life was my first day of basic training. Yep. When the TI opened his mouth, and I was just in awe. It's like, wow, he is really good.
Well, now, after that review, I did the same thing. I pulled up the PDF or the Word document. I did a word count on every swear I could think of, and there weren't that many. And I was talking to my dad about it, who's probably watching right now. He was he's a Lutheran minister. He's in his mid-80s now, and after I got that review, I called him. I said, Dad, what did you think of the swearing in this book? And he just kind of laughed, and he said, well, that's how people talk. How can you get upset if we live in a world that people talk like that? So that was.
Now, if it was your 10-year-old dinosaur book and you were cussing up a storm, then maybe there's a little room for that. But
yeah, actually, I wonder. I should look through this and make sure there's nothing really nasty in here.
So 10-year-old, you dropped an F-bomb. Got to get that gas.
For me, I had 2 women who wrote, and I think they're 3-star. And basically what it came down to is I killed off their favorite character, and they were mad about it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I was like, I've got like 80, 90 reviews now. I can kind of read between the lines. And I'm like, this is why you're really upset, but you won't come out and say it. So I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an author friend who is kind of struggling with the swearing thing because he didn't want to have any swearing in his book. It was kind of it was not Christian literature. It had kind of a religious tone to it, and a lot of his readers he knew would be. And so we were going back and forth because he would, in places where he would drop the F-bomb, it would say F ** K. I just kept wondering, is that actually better than just saying the word? It's probably not. You hear it in your head,
right?
Those stars.
You will read that out loud.
Yeah, but it's an interesting problem because it depends on your audience. Depends on who you're trying to reach. Oh.
EO, okay, you're taking the place of John.
Oh, I do not write serial killers because I wouldn't want to let on to the police what's really happening.
He is from a small town up north.
You have to write what you know, right? So yeah.
Yeah, personal experience.
Find the patterns in bright Hawaiian shirts help hide the splatters better. So
yeah, this is not a very good one for that though.
Well, it's faded, It's been through the wars.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get started? I mean, if you've got 2 books out, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy between your first 10-year-old typewritten missive and your first book?
Well, I mean, when I wrote that book, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write a novel. My whole life I wanted to write a novel, it was always science fiction and fantasy. Probably more fantasy. No, I don't know. A mix. It depends on the time what I read more. You guys are both like more fantasy buffs or fantasy writers, at least.
Yeah. Mike's writing his first science fiction right now.
Yeah,
which could be in Spacebo 4, hopefully.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, good luck.
You blink and you'll miss it, but it'll be in there.
Okay. Yeah, and so I went to college, both college and grad school. I was actually studying AI back in the early mid '80s. It was college was philosophy and computer science, and with studying cognitive psychology. And I came here to UW-Madison and studied AI, and I thought I was maybe going to do a career in AI, but then I decided the AI applications at that time were not widespread, and AI was really kind of weak then. So I ended up working in healthcare software. I really like working on stuff that I could see people use it and talk to the people who use it. Did that for about 20 years, programming, teaching. I think a lot of my writing practice came from kind of marketing writing. I helped with kind of technical sales and marketing, technical documentation, which seems like it wouldn't really apply, but I really learned to hone down a sentence doing that, because there's spin. It's all about spin. It's like you can say the same thing 5 different ways, and you got to think about which way is going to land. And I think that is relevant to writing too.
There's a phrase we used to use called judicious selection of fact.
There you go. Yep.
It's a really important thing, though, because I've worked for a university here in both their science department and engineering departments. Mm-hmm. And the guys that succeed are the ones who can explain it to me.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I have had professors pull out a whiteboard and I just stop them. It's like, if you're going to try to teach me math, I will save you time. Right? It's not happening.
Did you tell me to use the crayons?
Talk to me like a 4th grader and explain it to me like I'm in an elementary school, and then I can explain it to anybody else who needs to know it, right?
Yep.
And there are some people who just really have that knack to put it. I mean, you look at Neil deGrasse Tyson is probably the best example, right?
Sure.
Where he can take really abstract concepts and make people kind of at least think they understand them.
Yep. And there's a term in you're sometimes in software companies, geeks who can speak, and what you want is somebody who knows the stuff but can explain it to somebody who doesn't want to become an expert in the stuff, just wants to understand it. And that was because I did a lot of teaching. I did a lot of that kind of sales and marketing writing. I think that helped me really think through how do you take something that's in your head and try to make it approachable by somebody. So, and during that whole time, I was trying to write I was trying to write books, kept trying to write novels, and just starting and failing and starting and failing. Wrote lots of short stories, finished some, didn't finish others, never tried to do anything with them. And then I left healthcare software. Since then, doing web design, web development, mostly working with nonprofits. And this whole time, I just, in the back of my mind, I still feel like I want to write a book, but I'm getting old. And then our kids came along. We have a son and a daughter. They're both adults now, at least officially. They're over 18. They seem young to me, but they are adults. And the whole time they were growing up, we read to them. My wife and I sometimes we'd take turns on, the same story, but often we would bring a story we really wanted to read and, read it through to them. And, so I'm, at an inappropriately early age reading them Lord of the Rings and Dune and, stuff like that. And that really just, even though I'd been a reader the whole time, the process of saying a book out loud to somebody and seeing their eyes light up, especially a kid, you're reading something that was really meaningful to you and, seeing their eyes go wide and being like, man, I really like storytelling. That finally is what got me going at it again. So the first one, The Nothing Within, I think it took me 7 years, and it wasn't 7 years of constant work. Sure. It was just, I started at it and I was like, I'm never going to do this. I can't do this. I've failed every time before. Why would I keep going this time? But, I did finally keep going and going. And I think it was reading to the kids that really got me to do it again. Because, reading, it's like if you read a good book, you feel really good about that, especially reading it to somebody else. If you read a bad book, I find bad books and bad movies inspire me more to write, because I'm like, I could do better than that.
Right, exactly.
So whatever you're reading or watching, it can be inspiration.
It's like, how hard can it be?
Yep, that's what got me going.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you published your first one?
55.
All right, okay.
I think, because, 55. Yeah, and then this one was last year, and then I'm working on a third one that the first one was 7 years, the next one was 5 years. I'm hoping this is more like 3 years. We'll see. I have the worst writing process in the world, because the way that it has gone, it went all 3 times it's gone this way. The way that it goes is I start out really slow, and then I slow down, and then I stop. And I give up, and I decide I'm never going to finish the thing. But then as soon as I give up, it starts running around in the back of my head. And it might be 6 months, it might be a year. And that whole time, ideas are coming to me, and I'm writing them down in this top to bottom list by date, not by topic. It could be the theme of the book. It could be one specific conversation that happens. It could be a detail about a character. And then after a while, I end up with tens of thousands of words of these notes that are completely not organized, but the characters keep talking to me. I keep feeling like I want to tell this story. And so I'm finally like, I got to do this thing I hate doing, where I take this big, long list of things and try to make it into, contradictory things, and try to make it into something that makes sense. And so that's where I am now with the third book I'm working on, is, reconciling the notes.
It's kind of funny you say that. Mike and I were talking before you came on, and we're like, why do we do this? Because we don't have to, right? It's not paying any bills. In fact, it's costing us money on a regular basis. But then when you think about, I could stop, but then you just feel like, you're quitting now, it's just, you just can't. Yeah.
Yeah. With the first book, when I finished writing it, there was a period when I actually thought, I've written the novel. That's what I wanted to do. I wrote the novel. Why do I take the next step? Why do I look for an agent? Why do I send it to editors? Why do I bother my friends and family and ask them to read it for me? Why do I put it out there and risk getting 1-star reviews? And I still don't know why I did that, but I'm glad I did. It's at the moment I was like, what's the upside for me? I guess, maybe it becomes this raging bestseller. And really, mostly it was writing the thing that was the joy of it. But then once it's out there and you start to figure out, there might be some people who are grumpy about it, but there's some people who really like it. And I did something nice for their life. I kept them fascinated or happy or whatever it was for a few days or weeks. That's worth something.
I like to think of it that, when I'm long gone, maybe my grandkids or great grandkids, will still have a copy of it, that my kids have passed on to them or something. And so there'll still be a little something of you there, if they want to use that as an example or whatever, or like, man, great granddad sucked at this, whatever they want to do with it, it's fine.
Yeah. But then also, a lot of writers who really became well known and respected, it happened after they were dead. So I figure
there's still a chance.
Yeah, maybe I'll die and everything will go crazy for me.
So did you go through all the song and dance of trying to get an agent and a publisher and all that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've used. Do you guys know Reedsy? REEDSY?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've used Reedsy for both books, and I really like the service. I'm not a paid promotion, but it's a marketplace for finding editors and cover designers and whatever. And for the first book, I did hire a marketing consultant because I had no clue. Fortunately, I like everything in the writing process. It turns out I like everything from writing. I love editing. I like the marketing and all that, but I didn't know what to do. And the person I had some. It was money well spent, and they gave me some really excellent suggestions about, how to get the word around, and I did get it around pretty well. But she gave me one piece of advice that was wrong, and that is, once you've self-published, it's no harder to get an agent to take you on. And for some agents, that's absolutely true, but there are definitely agents that it's not true for. I mean, they'll tell you that on the form, or they'll tell you that when they respond, or whatever. For that work. Right, we will not accept previously published work, even if you self-published it. And what I've also found out, so I did, for the first book, I self-published it because I wanted it out there, and then I went through the whole query process. I don't know, 75 agents, something like that. And got some requests for manuscripts, which was validating, but none of them picked it up, and a lot of them said, "Sorry, we won't take a work you've already published." So for the second one, I decided I was gonna try looking for an agent first, and I did it very systematically. I made a big database. I went through them all. I had all that, and it was kind of same thing. But along the way, I got a really interesting response. Have you guys done queries?
I did 3, and then I was like, this is exhausting, and I don't know if I'll ever hear from them. So then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to self-publish.
Yeah, that's the thing, because you feel happy if they get back to you to say no.
Right.
Most of them just don't. The ones that get back to you to say no, it's a form letter from an intern. But then the weirdest thing happened. There was this one agent who was semi-legendary. I was hesitant to even send it to him because I forget his name, but I think he works at Writer's House, one of the really big places. He's this foundational figure. And I sent him a query, and he wrote it back with a handwritten letter explaining why he had decided not to go ahead, which blew my mind. And the handwritten letter said, I looked at your sales for your first book, and they were whatever they were, I forget, it was low. Because what they look at, and maybe this is only older agents, they look at print sales. If you're a self-published author, you are not going to have strong print sales because you cannot get your book into any major national chain. And if you get it into a local place, it's because you bought the copies and they have it on consignment probably. Yeah. So that made me realize that I was already going uphill because they were looking at the last book. And then in summer of 2022, did you guys heard about this lawsuit where Stephen King and a bunch of other authors
were suing? Yeah, the Simon & Schuster and
that's it.
Whoever, the other one.
Somebody was trying to merge. Right. And that the merger, it was kind of uninteresting for me. But what happened is because they had to go into court and say yes or no, we are not doing these business practices, they had to open the books on a bunch of numbers that they'd been keeping quiet for years about what happens when you're published. And it was crazy stuff. The average traditionally published book moves, I think it was about 200 copies in its lifetime. 200 print copies, granted, but still 200 copies. But that's the average. We're talking the average. We're not talking the median. The median is more like 6, which means even your family didn't buy it, right? So And increasingly, because writership has been going up and readership has been going down, the publishing houses are under more pressure to back known quantities. So if you're famous already, awesome. You
Right.
know, if you're a domain expert on something. But what they're often doing is putting out these contracts where they will get the rights to your book, do this kind of minimum hand waving support for it, get it in the least number of stores they're required to, and then put it on a back shelf, and you're stuck.
Yep.
You cannot decide, I'm going to push it here, I'm going to lower the price or whatever. So that was about when, that was last summer, when I just, no, 2 summers ago, when I just said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm done querying. I know how to do this because I did it the first time. There's a lot of support. There's a great community out there for self-published authors.
Yep.
I'm just going to do it myself and not worry about somebody buying my book and sitting on it.
Yep.
So
My favorite stat from that lawsuit is they said 96% of traditionally published authors sell less than 1,000 books.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
and that's like 2,000 is the minimum for getting on any bestsellers list.
yeah.
The other one, and this is what really, one of the things that really sold it for me, if you are traditionally published, your book has a far less than 1% chance of making it into a bookstore, which was for me the whole reason to go traditionally published. I mean,
say that again. Sorry.
a traditionally published book has a far less than 1% chance of getting into a bookstore, being stocked in a chain, major chain bookstore, because there's so many books out there.
Right.
So, and the bookstores, because they're feeling the same pressure of increased authorship, decreased readership, they're more hesitant too to put money into an unknown quantity. So they're going to put reprints of Stephen King rather than some new author, not universally, but that's their tendency.
Yeah, I mean, you go into any Barnes and Noble though, and a really high percentage of their shelf space is taken up by classic kind of stuff. You know, stuff that's been around for 30 to 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to break out of that cycle, I guess. I don't know, but so El here wants to know about your book.
Wow.
If you want to tell us a little bit about 3 grams of elsewhere and what the hell a gram is.
Yeah, this is
Who's your artist?
the artist is a guy named Daniel Schmelling. He does, if you just, he's German, it's Schmelling. He does beautiful work. And what I use different cover artists for the 2 books. First book, I use a guy named Jeff Brown, who also does awesome stuff. Jeff is more about kind of a classic genre cover. So if it's science fiction, fantasy, he just, home run. He does a great job every time that all his material I've seen. For this one, and so this is that's the cover, but to really get it, you need the back too, because it's really getting at kind of the prairie where I do all my bike riding and where I do a lot of my writing in my head. And it plays in the book. This is kind of it's a non-traditional cover because my concern was the book is not, the protagonist is at the beginning of the book in his mid-70s. By the end, he's 80, right? There's not a lot of ass kicking going on in this book, right? And so also it sets up as a mystery. You could start the book and think that you're reading a mystery, but it's not a mystery. Well, kind of a mystery. So it's a complicated, kind of confusing genre. And what I didn't want to do is have a strongly genre cover that implied there was going to be ass kicking and have people upset, because I know the cover is what sells the book, but I also want people who buy it to feel like they got the book that the cover said they were going to get.
Right.
And so it's a little more.
That cover looks literary fiction.
Yeah, it's that's a little contemplative.
Yeah, it doesn't say science fiction to me at all. That says literary fiction.
Yeah, and that was what I asked him to do. Is I said I was looking for. Daniel does some great literary fiction covers that are really kind of iconic and symbolic and stuff. He also does some more traditional genre work that you look at and you're like, okay, that's fantasy. I can tell somebody's going to cut some heads off in this one. So I asked him for something kind of in between, knowing he could do both. I said I like something that that it's got a hint of science fiction to it. I really want the open Midwest prairie to be part of it, to have this feeling of openness and emptiness to it, and also this kind of solitary figure who is just, sort of maybe not. Oh, you don't know if he's overwhelmed by the scope of it all, but he's very small to be facing it all. And that I feel like that's a good, it's a good lead into the book. If somebody reads the book and looks at the cover, they're going to be like, yeah, okay, those go together.
Nice. Oh, he did a lovely job. It's
Good.
it's a type of cover I think would look really nice as a poster size or something on the wall.
I should do that. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I've got the source file, so I could just print me a great big
that thing out.
image of it.
So El Montague has started messaging like crazy, so he should be banned any minute now.
Put on
Your first book,
like this one, the Nothing Within.
Yep.
Yeah. So this one is, it's like I said, it's set in. I grew up in near Amish country in central Ohio. A lot of people think of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, as being Amish country, and it is, but I think it's a little stronger in Mennonite. Holmes County, Ohio, is the largest population of Amish people in the country. And like when I was growing up, they still had horse tie-ups at a lot of the stores for the buggies because they would come into town. And my dad had one church in town, but the original church was was built in the 1850s or something, way out in Amish country. And we didn't go to that one much. But when we did, it was just fascinating because it was very, salt of the earth farmer type people, but a lot of them were either worked with the Amish and knew them, or were former Amish who had, fallen, who had become English, they would say, they'd fallen from the faith. And that always fascinated me. And so the first book, I decided to take that part of Ohio and run it forward a couple thousand years after an apocalypse. So it's post-apocalyptic, and it's just like, what would Amish culture look like way in the future if it's the only culture, And so it's just exploring that. And there's a protagonist who, it kind of explores that, but the thing with both books, and the thing that I was mentioning earlier that sometimes really rubs people the wrong way, is I cannot just start with one character and one timeline and tell it to the end. And I have nothing against that. In fact, most of what I read is that. I like that. But I've always got multiple timelines, multiple narrators. There's songs, stories, news interrupting it all. So like in the latest one, there's two timelines and two narrators, and they're clearly connected somehow, but you're not sure how until almost the end. And it was the same with this one. The first one, the Nothing Within, was actually more so that way. It was a little overwhelming. And so it asks a lot of the reader. And I don't always want to have a lot asked of me. Mike, thick read, itty bitty lead, big twist in your face. Huh, I don't know.
He likes big books and he cannot lie.
Ah, okay. Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Yes.
So, it's a story, but there's always like the backstory and the future story. And, I don't always want to read that book, but that's just how I think as a writer,
But, it's different enough where that's probably part of the reason of the success it's been having within Spacebell this year.
Could be. Yeah. And as I read the review, and I don't see all the reviews, but some of them post in good reviews. It's fair to say I've read every review anybody's ever written about either of my books, and I learned from them. Yeah. And especially in the last 6 weeks, there have been a lot more reviews, and usually they'll say this is supposed to be because I'm a Spacebo, reviewer. And there's always, it's always the yes, but review. It's like, I really liked the story. I really enjoyed it. But man, there was a lot to keep track of, and I'm not sure I really understood it all. So, that's the
science fiction readers should be used to having a lot to keep track of, right? I mean, look at a lot of Asimov's Foundation trilogy or anything. There's all kinds of shit going on there that you have to try to keep track of, and who's who and where's what and everything else.
Have you guys read Jessamyn's The Fifth Season?
I think I have it. And I think I started reading it.
Me too. I've started reading it 3 times. And every time I was like, this is too hard. I give up. I can't. Because within the first, and this is like my first book, within the first 50 pages, there's like 4 points of view. I'm out. I can't. And then I finally stuck with it because I kept seeing good reviews of it. And I finally stuck with it. And it's that same kind of thing where gradually, yeah, I mean, complexity is a hallmark of the genre. I think, gradually it kind of comes together in your head. You know that they're going to come together. Right. I think it takes that leap of faith to say, okay, I'm going to assume this author's not an idiot and that they're not giving me 3 completely separate stories and that I'm supposed to enjoy them, that somehow they're connected. And so half the fun is figuring out how are they connected. And then at the end for the reader and also for me as the author, what I really want to happen is for people to get to the end and say, first of all, that makes sense. And 2, I didn't see that coming. And 3, that's fair.
I don't I see it coming too much, as long as it comes together in a way, like you say, that makes sense and helps carry the story. But I totally get what you're saying about having the different strings, because once I'm aware that the different strings are there, right? Mm-hmm. Once everybody kind of comes in, that's always what I'm looking for. It's like, okay, how are they going to put these into the same place, right? Yeah. But if they try to give you too many all at once, that's where it gets, had I written Lord of the Rings, I would have been super tempted to do a POV from Sauron.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But when you think about it, you never get any of that. Anything you get on his motivations or anything else is all from the one-sided.
And that's why I feel like, at least for the way I write, beta readers are critical for me. For both books, I've kind of sent it through two rounds. I used 2 rounds of review, and it's been a total of 15 or 20 beta readers, and God bless them for giving me that time for a book that's not done yet, and especially the first pass is really rough. Because that's where I can say, and I pepper questions in there. Like I'll insert a page in the middle of the book and say, okay, at this point, please tell me, who do you think this person is? Why do you think this is going on? What do you think is going to happen next? And then they can, from that, I can kind of say, oh, okay, it's working, or, oh, I've made it too hard. I need to make this less hard. It was obvious to me because it's in my head, but I need to make it obvious to them.
So after one book, you have a stall of 20 beta readers?
Well, the first I think it was 15 for the first and 20 for the second. And partly it's partly friends and family. Also, the company I worked at was, grew and grew and grew. The healthcare software company, it's called Epic. And I was there for 20 years. I knew so many people, and a lot of them are still friends or at least acquaintances. And so I put out an announcement on Facebook. I would say, hey, I need some beta readers. You need to understand this book is not done yet, and it probably sucks. And you'd be surprised how many people say, oh, I'd actually like to read that. And a surprising number of them actually do, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you about Spacebo.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Spiffbo, they have the one page you can go to, and it has all the books and all the scores and the averages, and so you can tell who's winning the horse race. Is there anything like that for Spacebo?
I don't think there's that level of detail. It's with the Spacebo, there are not a lot of updates. It doesn't feel like there's a strong central hand that says it's been 3 months. Now we post this. It's been 6 months. Now we post that.
Yeah, that's my feel too.
So, periodically you'll see who's in the running, but nothing detailed. Yeah, and I agree with EL that sci-fi doesn't have to be complex. And like I said, with the 5th season, I started reading that, and the first 2 times I was like, no, this is what I want right now. I would pick up some beginning to end story that was. You can have a great story. You can have a deep story with great characters that just starts at the beginning, ends at the end, and I love that. That's I'm in Spacebo. I have been reading Kanai, which is a little more like that. I mean, there is a little back and forth. You have some interludes where there's a kind of a view of why the main character is where they are, but it's the main character still. It's like first person main character, and so far it's a ripping good time. I'm enjoying the story, and it's not trying to play with my head. I'm curious what's going on, but it's not because the author is intentionally trying to make me wonder what's going on.
Now in the Spiffbo finalists, they had 10 of them, and they all had their own kind of Discord page or whatever, where the 10 of them kind of got together and talk about food and whatever. Do you have any type of thing like that with the six of you?
No, although the author of Kanai, Dave Dobson, just a few days ago sent an email, and again, like Mike, like we were talking about, he had to track me down through my author site, but he found me, and he said that he was looking into getting some kind of a live chat or something for the authors and maybe the judges. He wasn't sure. So I said, sure, I'm interested if that ends up happening, but there hasn't been an ongoing thing like that.
If that comes up, you should probably do that, because all the feedback we got from the SPSFC guys was that was probably the best part of the whole thing. Just really kind of getting to know 9 other authors on a pretty personal level. So
yeah, and I'm grateful to the whole idea of SPSFC was that there are a lot of really good self-published novels out there that for whatever reason they may or may not click. They may or may not hit a broad audience, and it's a great way to highlight them. And I'm the semifinals, the finals, it's great to have that list for when I'm looking for something to read. I'd like to support some of these authors, and a lot of them are better than what I'm seeing in traditionally published. So it'd be great. I hope we do end up talking to each other. It'd be nice to swap stories and that sort of thing.
So I have to ask, how bad do you want that gun as the main prize?
the ray gun.
The ray gun.
I didn't even know it was a gun. So it's a ray gun. Isn't it an axe in SPSFC? What is it in SPSFC?
In SPSFC, he has Dumbledore's wand, but he calls it a selfie stick for whatever reason. So I mean, who cares? I can get that for $8 off Amazon. Yeah. But the ray gun, if you look for season 1 and season 2, they're handmade and they're very different from one another.
Oh, really?
And I mean, I think somebody is out in Hollywood and they're getting a prop guy to make it, because I'm like, that would be a trophy worth having.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I was okay either way until you said that, winning or losing. But I definitely want it now that I know I get a ray gun. Yeah. No, being in the finals is amazing, and I am good with that. It's good company, so I'm happy to be at that point, even without a ray gun.
Well, we'll talk to you after you win and see if you're the same way. So, this is so much better.
No, after I win, I'm not going to talk to you or anybody else. I'm too good.
So you only have how many subscribers? No, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Talk to my agent.
That's right, punk ass.
Yeah.
Mike, you got a fun question from the dice machine?
I do, and it is number 9. Would your this does not apply to your book, but we're going with it. Would your character be good at pickup lines? Bonus points if you can give an example.
Oh, actually, my character would be extraordinarily good at pickup lines, because his superpower, and it's like it's going to sound like the most pathetic superpower ever, but it's empathy. It's like I can tell what people feel. That's it. But yeah, he would be really good at just going in there and telling, is this working or not? So yeah, I would definitely put my money on him. I see I couldn't guess the pickup line because I'm not empathic. He wouldn't be able to read their mind, but he could just start saying a few things and feel, how's this going? Oh yeah, that worked. Okay, let's go that route.
He wouldn't say anything. He would just listen.
Yes, that's right. That is the key to a good
without
pickup line.
I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm just here to listen to you.
Yeah. I've been working with AI a lot in writing my 3rd book, in just kind of for brains. Like, it's an awesome meta thesaurus and all that kind of stuff. And I have a custom trained GPT that specializes in fantasy books, because my 3rd book's fantasy. And I actually asked it to generate some random questions I could ask some live stream book interviewers to turn this around on you. So I am hijacking your live stream.
Awesome.
As writers, how has interviewing other authors influenced your writing?
Not at all.
Okay. That's a valid answer.
Well, I mean, no, we've done, this is like episode 86.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
something
man.
like that.
Okay.
And I've been interviewing people since I was 18.
Okay.
So, I mean, every now and then someone will say something. There was a dude who said something a couple months ago, actually. So I'm going to totally take back what I just said. He was explaining something about his magic system.
Mm-hmm.
And it just ticked off an idea in my head that I am now halfway through a book based on that idea from something that dude said in an interview.
All right.
So.
Okay. How about you, Mike?
I'm thinking, it not a lot, because my first series, it's going to be 7 books, and I can tell you how it ends if you really held me down and forced me. I know what everything is going to be, so it's kind of hard to. And this sci-fi book, I actually started writing first, and then I set it down and said, I'm going to try write fantasy, see if I can do that. And 4 books later, I came back to the sci-fi book. So I don't know. I'm just starting a new series after the sci-fi is out, where I can actually be like, ooh, new ideas, since everything else is kind of, I know where it's going. But I like listening to other people's ideas, and I'm like, that'd be a cool idea. Yeah, I should really read their book, and then I don't. I'm very good at
You're going to read
buying books. I'm very good at buying them. So authors should at least appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to speak for Mike here, maybe out of turn, but I think what we get more out of this is ideas of process and marketing and all that kind of stuff, right? Just listening to how people are doing it successfully or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of, picking some of those ideas and for the same reason that, the SPSFC folks and yourself, when you get into that finalist group, we're just meeting so many new people and kind of creating those networks. It changes the whole thing, because you don't feel like you're alone in your basement anymore.
Yeah. I mean, after the first book, I could tell I wasn't alone, because there's so much out there just in online communities, but I did feel pretty lonely, just figuring everything out. And it was great to, pay a marketing consultant on Readsy and to have some editors, but it is nice to know there's a broader community out there. Yeah. Have you guys noticed any difference in fantasy versus science fiction authors interviewing them? Or are they just the same stuff?
Science fiction guys know more math.
I don't.
Generally.
Oh, okay.
I would almost say I think sci-fi tends to be more contemplative. Fantasy, I mean, if you read my stuff, it's go over there, smash this, goes poorly, figure it out, do something else, break something else. It's more like I need to be entertained. Mm-hmm. Where, I mean, sci-fi, I think even if you're just exploring one simple idea, you're exploring ideas much more than, glorified D&D campaign. At least for me, my writing, mine's a D&D campaign.
I think you said something, Andy, earlier. You called it geek speak. Mm-hmm. And I think the difference between science fiction and fantasy is the difference between geek and nerd. Geek speak and nerd word.
Okay.
Right. It's a very subtle kind of difference between a geek and a nerd. Mm-hmm. And it's hard, it's like pornography. It's hard to explain, but when you see it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the difference. Is your geeks are more sci-fi and your nerds are more fantasy, perhaps?
Okay, I'll buy that. Well, and there's that crossover of like some fantasy has these magic systems that are so rigorous, like I'm thinking Name of the Wind or stuff like that, where it almost feels like sci-fi, even though it's in a fantasy setting.
Yeah. A really hard part about writing that I found, it was pulling myself back from making everything have to make sense.
Yeah.
Right, because there's always that thing. It's like, well, that just doesn't make it sense. Like, this is magic, and the dude's talking to a dog.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't need to make sense entirely. It just needs to kind of flow.
Yeah, and I often think, people are gonna call me on it, and nobody ever calls me on it. So yeah, I think it does make sense to give yourself some slack and just say, let's assume they're not going to call me on every inconsistency, and they'll trust me that it makes sense, even though it's not obvious.
I mean, there are some things, and we talk about this all the time, like, the people in Harry Potter forgetting spells that they learned the last book, right? It's like, well, why didn't they use this? That would have been perfect, right? They just forget they knew it. But sometimes you just got to kind of go, yeah, that'll get in the way if I bring that back up. So
I will tell you, I wrote 4 fantasy books. Now I'm writing sci-fi, and my average chapter length in fantasy is like 1,600, 1,800 words, and in sci-fi it's about double that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just you have to get across the world, which you can't just be like, it's medieval ages, go. So I think a lot of it is that, and Ro will tell you I don't use adjectives, and
I was just going to say, and that's without using adjectives.
Wow. Do you use like prepositions or articles, any of that stuff, or is that just junk?
So I use a lot of those.
So Ro is my editor, and when I write, first thing I do is I have to get the plot, and I have to get the characters and kind of figure out where they fit.
Yeah.
And then the very last thing I do after Ro has edited my book is then I go back and I read scene by scene. I'm like, okay, this is a white featureless room. Let's describe it some. So the setting is the absolute last thing I do, and Ro never sees it. So poor Ro.
I pity editors. Yeah. One thing I heard, I think it was an ad for like Master Class or whatever, but Neil Gaiman said that you write the first draft of the book, and then you figure out what the book's about, and you write the second draft of the book. And that's like one piece of advice that really did affect me. Mike, you mentioned D&D. Hang on a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Everybody take note of what Andy's doing. He came prepared, far more prepared than Mike and I have ever come to one of these in 85 episodes.
I have a treat for you.
Is that like a first edition?
Nice.
That is the OG.
That's right. Those are the rules to use right there.
This is basic Dungeons and Dragons before there was an advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This is my first box.
Right.
Bought from the College of Worcester bookstore in Worcester, Ohio, probably in 1979, 1980.
I used to have that.
Yep. And I used it, then my kids used it, and I am just keeping it forever and ever. I love this little box, even though I never,
you see on TikTok and stuff now, you see these dudes talking about D&D, and it's all like math and charts and all this. It's like, whoa, when the hell did math come into D&D? That is just so wrong. When I last time I played was the late 80s, stationed overseas, and I think we were on 2nd edition rules, right? And we didn't really like those, and I think they're on like 5th now. Yep. And it just all seems so much more complicated.
Yeah. Actually, when my kids were playing, they started with 4th. And if I have this right, 4th was like so psychotically complex that nobody could enjoy the game in any way. And so 5th was trying to get back to like 2nd or 2.5 or something. But I think it has gotten into a min-maxing kind of spreadsheety. But there's still people who will play it and kind of ignore the rules and just have fun, which is the heart of the thing.
Yeah, I think you have to have certain numbers, right? I mean, you need to know an armor class, you need to know, weapons damage, you need to know how many hit points they have, and after that, go crazy.
Yeah,
right. It's like we had a guy who was our wizard. Sorry, we're going to delve into this a little bit, and he said, "I have a spell that I can make like a fireball on something, right?" And we're like, okay, that makes, our DM said, all right, that makes sense, right? If you put a fireball spell on an apple and somebody grabs the apple, it'll explode. He's like, great. I make about 20 of those and I put them between pieces of wood and I bury them just below the ground. Dude's making fireball landmines. It's like, awesome. Yep. That's great.
And it takes a DM who's willing to say, I'll allow it.
Right. I mean, you're going to run a risk every time you make one that it blows up in your face, right? But okay.
Yeah. Instead of somebody who says, no, that's not in the book. I don't see that anywhere. I'm sorry, you can't do that.
Alcohol helps too.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So, Mike, Andy, do either one of you have another question?
I probably do. Oh, do you have any rituals around your writing?
Yeah, I do. I open up Word, I look at it, I get up and I get a drink, and I come back and I look a couple random things up on the internet, watch some YouTube videos, get up, go get a snack,
That's a good ritual.
And then, about 2 hours in, I'm like, I have to write something.
That's almost exactly it.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's like you're standing over my shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. With the first book, I had such a lack of confidence that it was going to work that I would, as a ritual, I would usually have like a beer or, a old fashioned or something. And I kind of developed if you have more than a beer or two, it makes it really hard to write. But it did help me to loosen up enough that I could just say, I'm not going to get in my head about whether I know where this is going. I'm just going to put some words on the paper and see how this turns out. So, and you can't do that for editing. You have to be sober for editing. But sometimes, a little bit of alcohol would help me kind of break through that. And then, the second book, I was like, okay, I can write a book. So I felt like I could trust myself to just kind of let go. But it was really hard the first time to not get analytical and to think, wait, what's the next thing that's going to happen? I don't know. Just put some words down, see what happens, man.
I will tell you, I would always get nervous, and I just found if I just went for a walk, I'm like, look, I'm fat. It doesn't take me long walking before I'm tired, and then I don't have that anxiousness anymore because I don't have that kind of energy. I'm like, okay, that's over. I'm just going to type.
Yeah.
And that would be the way. Instead of alcohol, I walked, but often, not often. So there's that.
Yeah.
Walking's the best thing.
It is.
I ride my bike a lot. Just in general, I ride my bike a lot, and I often use that. And actually, the character in 3 Grams of Elsewhere does that as a way to calm down because he's got this empathy superpower essentially, but he can't turn it off. So all the time, he's always feeling everybody's emotions, and and that was that. He's kind of reflecting me that I'll just whatever I'm stressed about, I'll get on my bike, and if I'm out for an hour or 2 hours, I'll start to figure things out. I think the endorphins kick in, and there's this one thing I could not figure out, and it's going to end the book because of the contradiction, and I can't do this. And I'll get out there, and then I'll be like, oh, I could do that, and I'll start to kind of. But you have to remember. I guess I could stop and write it down, but yet I want to keep going. So you have to remember. And so I'll be chanting, like I'll pick one word to represent that idea, and then I'll pick another word for the next one. I'll have this string of 6 or 7 or 8 words that I'm chanting over and over, hoping I'll remember by the time I get home. So that's my ritual.
There is that little cassette tape up there.
Yeah.
It's a voice recorder on your phone.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of it.
You're just walking along, just hit that, and
yep.
Just so you don't forget it, and you can start thinking about something else, and then you get home and transcribe it all. And
yeah, because what I've ended up doing is I'll pull up I have a to-do app that I've got on my phone, and sometimes I'll narrate into it, and it mistranscribes stuff, and I get home and it's like I might as well not have done it. But yeah, I think voice recorder makes more sense. I should do that.
And it has the little voice recorder thing like you're used to, the old cassette players, where you got the 2 buttons that you push down to record. So.
Yeah.
You're speaking in code now, Ro, to some of our viewers.
They'll figure it out. They can look it up. They have the internet.
It's a rotary telephone. Yeah, and I agree with EL that it's just like you get out there, you can't figure it out, and I think, and it's kind of like you, Mike, like walking. It's just getting away from it. It's kind of like when you can't remember a word. There's a word on the tip of your tongue, and the harder you try, the less it's going to work, and so you just stop. And I think exercising, whatever it is, just getting out there kind of helps your brain to unclench and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
Also, it beats, thinking about pedaling up hills and stuff. So
yes, it does. Not so many hills here. Oh, actually, there's some hills here. Yeah, I guess it's a little hilly depending on where you go.
Yeah. All right, Andy, you have blown an hour of your life.
Well,
you get it back. Thank you for
an hour of yours as well. I appreciate it.
We didn't cover audiobooks, EL. Do you have audiobooks, Andy?
On the first one I do. Yeah, it was funny. On the first one, I got a BookBub, and it was like the full BookBub, US and international, which was huge. And right after that, because the way a BookBub works is if you can get one, you are almost guaranteed to end up in a #1 spot in some category on Amazon for that weekend. And apparently that was enough that an audiobook publication company, they just tick people off. They find the number ones, they grab them, they contact them, they offer a contract. And they did. They gave me, a small advance, and they said, tell you what, we will produce the audiobook for you. We'll pick a, narrator, we'll get it out there. And so that one has an audiobook. The second one has not. I've thought about narrating it. Because I could do the main character for sure. I don't know if my voice would hold up for that. I have to think about it. I actually have a book club coming up this weekend for the second book, but it's just international. So I get to see, is that phenomenal or is it just okay?
How hard was it to get a book club deal? Because that is a pretty big deal, getting the full book club.
Yeah, it was hard. The first one, it was my third try, I think. And then after that, I tried once or twice more and didn't get one. This one I've tried 3 times, and the third time they said, we'll give it to you, but we don't have a US spot. Just it's UK, Canada, Australia. So we'll see. I assume those are going to be better than not having a book club. But if you can get one, it's one of the few email marketing promotions that you are almost guaranteed to make your money back.
Because it's not cheap, right? I mean, doesn't it? Like US book club costs close to $1,000.
Yeah, I think for the full now it's around 800 if you get the US and international. The international was about 200, which makes me think it'll be 25% is good, and I'm okay with 25% is good of awesome, Yeah. But we'll find out. I don't actually know. Maybe most of the sales are coming from US people, but I'll keep applying because I really think they're worth it.
So, I mean,
are you wide or are you just on Amazon?
I'm wide, and that was an interesting decision because for the first book, I started narrow. I started on Kindle Unlimited, and then went wide. And I decided on the second one to just start wide because I didn't feel like Kindle Unlimited did that much for me. And you are not going to get a book club if you're narrow.
Right.
So I decided I would start wide and really hope for book club, which I didn't get right away. But that way I could, there are any mailing list vendor that you're going to buy time with, they're going to, give you the option to promote Apple, Kobo, Google, all those. So Barnes and Noble. So it's nice to be able to do that.
Nice. What's the application process like
for a book club? Oh, it's easy. You just answer some questions about, you give them the Amazon ASIN and they pull all the information, and you just tell them what's the normal price, what's your promotion price, and then is your date flexible. You're in with the first book, I was not flexible, which I think was a mistake. But this one, every time I was like, yeah, whenever works, I will change my schedule for you. So it's a one-page, a short one-page form. It's pretty easy to fill out.
Yeah, awesome. All right.
Okay.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for
thanks for hanging out with us, and good luck on finding out when you get your space ray gun.
If I get it, great. If I don't, I'm pretty happy how things are right now.
Oh man, to be one of the final 6, that's good. I'm not saying good enough. That's something pretty awesome in itself, especially seeing how your second book, and
it's definitely good enough.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with it. It's good to be at this point.
Well,
good luck with you guys' work too. I know you're both constantly, working, right? You're written a lot of books, and I'm sure you got more to come.
Yeah, we're trying. If we didn't have damn day jobs, we'd be all right.
Yeah, well, there's day job and this and writing. I don't know how you fit that all in, but good luck with it.
I think this is a way that we skip out of writing in a way that makes us feel like we're not skipping out on writing.
You're clearing your head.
Right.
You're making creative space.
Getting ideas.
Yeah, very good. Good plan.
Okay. Well, now the time has come for everyone to wave awkwardly.
All right.